Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone, we are Group 12 Today we are going to present our research proposal poster entitled Special Language Privileges Among Multilingual Indonesian Students at the University in Tasikmalaya, Left, Right, or North, South. In this presentation, we will briefly explain the abstract, background, and problem statement, research question, methods, hypothetical results, discussion, conclusion, and key references. First, Wulan will present the abstract of our study. Wulan, please.
All right, thank you very much, Rifda. I will present the abstract. Our proposed study investigates how multilingual Indonesian students at the University in Tasikmalaya describe directions in daily life. Indonesian usually uses relative terms like left and right, while many local languages still use absolute terms like north, south, east, and west. We will examine whether students prefer relative or absolute spatial reference frames when giving directions, and how the multilingual background may influence this choice. Data will be collected through interviews, tasks, and observation, then analyzed thematically. We expect a dominant use of relative terms, with some students flexibly switching to absolute system depending on context and language.
Okay, we will move to the background. In the background, we start from the idea that language shapes how people think about space. Different languages use different systems to describe these directions. Indonesian mostly uses relative terms like left, right, while regional languages such as Sundanese or Javanese and Balinese still use absolute terms like north, south, or Wetan, Kaler, Kidul, Kulon. With more than 700 local languages, multilingual Indonesian speakers may develop unique spatial habits as they switch between languages. Therefore, this study focuses on multilingual university students in Tasikmalaya, a region with a strong Sundanese linguistic identity. The goal is to explore whether their linguistic background influences their preference for using either relative terms such as left-right or absolute terms such as north-south when giving spatial descriptions.
Okay, next problem statement of this study is Indonesian use different ways to give direction. Most use relative term like left or right, but local languages may use other system. Because of this, we don't yet know whether multilingual students prefer relative or absolute direction. This study examines which system they use most and how their language background affect that choice.
All right, from that problem, we propose one main research question. What spatial reference system do multilingual Indonesian students prefer when giving directions, using relative like left and right, or absolute north, south, east, and west? To answer this question, we will use a descriptive qualitative design, and our participants, multilingual university students who actively use Bahasa Indonesia alongside at least one regional language, such as Sundanese or Javanese. Thank you.
And all the data will be collected through three techniques. First is our students' usual ways of describing directions. Second is task-based elicitation, where they perform direction-giving tasks in different languages. And the last one is naturalistic observation to capture spontaneous use of directions in real situation. And all the data will be transcribed and analyzed thematically by categorizing spatial expressions into relative and absolute frames of reference. And the findings will then be interpreted through the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis to understand how multilingual experience shapes spatial cognition and orientation habits.
All right, the findings are predicted in 5 points. The first one, multilingual students at Universitas Siliwangi are expected to mostly use relative systems such as left, right, in front of, and behind in both Indonesian and English. Second, the use of absolute system like north, south, east, and west is predicted to be limited and mostly used in rural or traditional contexts. Third, students are expected to show flexible switching between relative and absolute system depending on the language and the situation. Fourth, at first, most students may not realize that their language background affects how they give direction. They may only become aware after thinking about it. And the last one, these findings are expected to support linguistic relativity, which means language can influence the way people think about space. Thank you.
All right, and the discussion of this research is the predicted findings are to show that multilingual students at University in Tasikmalaya mostly rely on a relative way of thinking about space, such as left, right, or in front of me. Fixed directions like north, south, east, and west are likely to be less common, although some students may fix both system and switch depending on the language they are using. If confirmed, This pattern would suggest that multilingual experience encourages flexible spatial thinking. It will also support the Sapir-Whorf idea that the languages people use can make certain spatial habits more salient. In the EFL classroom, this relative system would be helpful because it measures how space is usually described in English. But students should still learn as a spatial system for effective intercultural communication.
To conclude, our study indicates that multilingual students at Universitas Siliwangi tend to rely more on relative spatial terms such as kiri, kanan, depan, and belakang, or left, right, front, and back when giving directions. This preference appears consistently in both Bahasa Indonesia and English. In contrast, absolute spatial terms like north, south, east, and west, or utara, selatan, timur, and barat are used far less frequently and mostly appear in traditional or regional language contexts. We also found that some students switch flexibly between relative and absolute systems, depending on the language they are using and the social or situational context. Overall, the findings suggest limited metalinguistic awareness, meaning students are often unaware of how their linguistic background influences the way they think about and describe space.
Alright, for the implication of this study for teaching and learning, especially in EFL context, this suggests the importance of helping students understand different systems of spatial reference, since English often uses relative direction and sometimes requires precise orientation, and the study highlights the needs for the intercultural training so students can recognize and adapt to diverse ways of describing space, ultimately improving communication across cultural and linguistic boundaries. Our proposal is grounded into key references. First, Benjamin Lee Whorf's work, Language, Thought, and Reality, which introduced the concept of linguistic relativity. Second, Stephen Levinson's book, Space in Language and Cognition, which explains how different languages structure spatial reference and cognition. And that's all from me. I return it back to the moderator.
Thank you very much for your attention. That is the overview of our research proposal on special language preferences among multilingual students in Tasikmalaya. We welcome any questions or suggestions to improve this study. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.